Every time I was blessed with a precious moment, inside of me was always a this could be better. My whole life was spent chasing a thing that didn't even exist yet. I robbed myself of my life. I robbed myself of the preciousness of a moment because I wanted more. And the more was in the present, which I was too blind to see. Every time I was granted the possibility of acquiring a relationship, I always pushed them away due to fear of being seen and them not loving who I truly was. So I used the same excuse I always used. I'm working on myself. I'm not in the right headspace to give something to another I can't give myself. There was truth in that. But sometimes it takes being loved by another to show you your potentialities. And I rejected that. I believed until I felt the right way, had the right job, and had the right mindset. Then I would be worthy of being loved. But that time never came. And I pushed the possibilities of them granting me this opportunity of love. And I never took a step forward to love myself. I was afraid of intimacy, so I pushed people away. That made me lonely. But it was I who made myself lonely, because the fear in me of being seen was stronger than the potentiality of love. So I hated myself for what I did, and I did the same thing over again. I'm a big dreamer. I am often dreaming, escaping from my reality. This dreaming, I envision a reality that I want, remembering the future that I would never have, but wish I did. And yet, it remained a wish because I never took the next step to make my dream a reality. And I always told myself I'll do it tomorrow, but that tomorrow never came. So I kept dreaming, as my reality rotted. Self-sabotage is when a part of you protects you from a discomforting or painful experience. It protects you short-term, but long-term it just digs you in a deeper hole. I have found myself quite fond of a certain hobby I have picked up. I wanted to start getting serious with it, but instead of executing and taking real risks, I would watch videos endlessly, trying to find the perfect strategy. Weeks passed and no real risk was taken, and I would tell myself, I'm just learning, but no growth was experienced. I was afraid of failing, so I told myself, if you never truly try, you never truly fail. How can someone so cowardly still have the strength to protect their own ego? I tend to escape into different worlds when reality feels cruel. Instead of facing my reality and the causes of my uneasiness, I suspend into another world because it's easier. It makes me feel safe. But after I suspend, the guilt increases, telling myself I shouldn't be doing this. I should be working on building the world I truly want to be in. But this guilt just pushed the blade even deeper. So I suspended into another world again. To not think, to not feel. I am constantly speaking ill of myself, telling myself that I am lazy, that I always mess up, or that I robbed myself of life. So deep down in my psyche, I tell myself, and why try? But I'm going to fail anyways. Never really taking a risk and never truly growing. And instead of accepting the feeling of sadness, I analyze it philosophically, so I can see the cause of what's making me feel sadness, but never process it. I understand the feeling, but I never allowed it. I deemed myself unworthy to feel sadness. You imagine success, but never take action because you see the responsibility and expectations, so you pull back, not knowing that in order to become the you that is successful, it requires transformation. And oftentimes we do not fear failure, but transformation. We are stuck in the identity we have given ourselves, the self that is afraid of transformation. A broken self, because feeling sadness is what you always knew. So it became a home, and transformation leaves this self behind. So we hesitate because we are afraid of losing our refugee. Because if I heal, then who am I? Aristotle had a key concept in what could be relevant to self-sabotage. Acrasia, which means acting against your better judgment. You know what is good for you, you want it, but you never do it. It's not knowledge that you lack that results in your failure, but it is failure due to knowledge not being in the moment of action. In Aristotle's terms, there's a difference between having knowledge and using knowledge. And in acrasia, knowledge is asleep. You know that you need to train and study, but desires creep in. And when desires arise, reason goes quiet. And that is why you fail to act. He writes in the Nicomachean Ethics that incontented man knows the good, but does not do it because passion overwhelms reason. Self-sabotage can be seen being present when emotions overthrow rational judgment. Aristotle divides the soul by the rational part, which is reason, and the non-rational part being desire and appetite. Aristotle states that the non-rational part can be trained to obey reason, so when the non-rational part is often dominant, it is due to it being untrained. Aristotle states that vice is a habit. He says, when we become what we repeatedly do, if we repeatedly avoid discomfort and delay responsibility and indulge in pleasure, we build the habit of self-sabotage. If it is a habit that is formed through repetition, then the same habit can be formed for excellence. Self-sabotage continues when you attach pleasure to the wrong things. Aristotle says the virtuous person takes pleasure in the right things. Escapism gives immediate pleasure, and discipline gives you delayed satisfaction. According to Aristotle, self-sabotage feels so strong because they are immediate and sensory, unlike reason, which is abstract and future-oriented. In moments of fatigue, the body wins. That is why you tend to sabotage yourself more when you are lonely and tired. Aristotle's solution to stop self-sabotage would not be self-hate or motivation, but habit, small ones and repeated ones. We become brave by doing brave acts, not thinking about being brave, but doing brave acts. Instead of analyzing the good, we should perform the good. Identity comes after action. Aristotle would say that you self-sabotage because you have not yet habituated virtue, since virtue requires time, repetition, patience, and self-forgiveness. St. Augustine describes knowing the good, loving the good, and still not doing it. In his famous prayer, "Grant me chastity and continence, but not yet," is one of the first depictions of self-sabotage. Augustine states that the problem in self-sabotage is not ignorance, but it is a division between the will, the divided will. You say you will change, but you don't, because there are two wills. One will desires transformation, and the other will desires comfort. Augustine says that the mind commands the body and it obeys, but the mind commands itself and it is resisted. Augustine says that you do not self-sabotage because you hate excellence. You sabotage because you love comfort, safety, and escape. These are not evil, but they are lesser goods that are loved too greatly. Augustine calls this ordo amoris, which means disordered love. When the love for the lesser goods are placed above the highest good, the soul fragments. Augustine writes, "The enemy held my will, and from it had made a chain for me. This chain was habit." He says the will perverted becomes lust. Lust served becomes habit, and habit not resisted becomes necessity. Self-sabotage is giving permission to a repeated habit. Why do we say not yet, like how Augustine said in "Grant me chastity and good continence, but not yet"? Because change feels like death. It is death. Your old self is dying. When Augustine was about to convert, he felt fear because he imagined giving up sexual indulgence, social status, and old identity. This is what self-sabotage protects. It protects the old self, even if that self is miserable. Augustine says he was miserable while indulging. He writes, being torn between two loves. He would say that this is not weakness, but it is the soul recognizing it was made for something higher. The soul cannot rest in temporary things. Escapism feels good briefly, but then the emptiness returns. Augustine believed that self-sabotage masquerades as freedom. He thought he was free while indulging, but later realized he was a slave to desire. He argues that true freedom is being able to want the right thing, not doing whatever you want. We rationalize what we secretly love, so we sabotage ourselves and then justify it. Kierkegaard states that when we self-sabotage, it is the self itself that is divided. He defines the self as self being a relation to that relates itself to itself. You are not just your thoughts, your body, or your emotions. You are a relationship between who you and who could become. And self-sabotage happens when you refuse to become. Despair in Kierkegaard's terms is an imbalance with the self, or being misrelated to yourself. There are three main forms of despair he speaks on. The subtle despair is not knowing you have a self, so you live unconsciously and distract yourself constantly. Not wanting to be yourself is the second one. You see your responsibility, your potential, and burden, but you never face it. Instead, you sit back. And the third one is wanting to be yourself, with no moral grounding, pure willpower, trying to save yourself alone, which sometimes leads to collapse. We are meant to ground ourselves in something beyond itself. Kierkegaard believed that self-sabotage is avoidance of becoming, because becoming yourself means accepting responsibility, freedom, and accepting that you cannot blame everything forever. Despair can often look like escapism, procrastination, overthinking, and infinite possibilities in your head without taking action. He states that anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. When you realize you could be great, or that you could change or you could change, possibility feels overwhelming, so you sabotage yourself to protect yourself from becoming, and to protect the old miserable you can't let go of. You may believe you are lazy, but in reality you are afraid of becoming. You believe transformation happens when you commit and choose to become, even if you feel divided. Leap. He warns us about our fantasy self. We imagine our disciplined version, so we begin to love the idea of ourselves more than the real slow becoming of yourself. We are not meant to admire our potential, but to live it. For Carl Jung, self-sabotage is rarely conscious. It is in the unlived parts of yourself fighting back. Jung believed the psyche has layers. The ego, which is what you constantly identify as. The personal unconscious, which are forgotten memories and repressed emotions. And the collective unconscious, which is a deep archetype patterns that are shared by humanity. Self-sabotage often comes from the clash between the ego and the shadow. The shadow is everything you reject about yourself, not just dark traits like lust or anger, but ambition, power, sexual energy, creativity, and emotional needs. Anything that is incompatible with your self-image gets pushed into the shadow. But what you repress does not disappear, it becomes autonomous, which means that it acts without your permission. If you identify yourself with the holy, or disciplined, or controlled, but you repress desires such as weakness, anger, and pride, those repressed parts will surface indirectly. You binge watch after periods of control. That could be shadow indulgence, or if you intellectualize instead of act, which could be shadow fear. The shadow wants recognition. If ignored, it will resurface indirectly. Jung also talks about the persona, the mask you wear socially. If your persona is a disciplined person, and internally you feel tired or lonely, the tension between the persona and the shadow grows, and eventually the shadow breaks through. This can be seen as self-sabotage. Jung warned us that the bigger the ideal, the bigger the shadow. If you aim to be perfect or disciplined, you may unconsciously despise your weakness. This weakness does not disappear, but it hides and returns at the worst moments. Jung also states that we project our shadow onto others. If we harshly judge people that are weak, cowardly, undisciplined, it may be because those traits exist in you, and you cannot tolerate them. So projection keeps the shadow unconscious. Jung's goal was individuation, which means becoming whole, not perfect, but whole. This includes strengths and weaknesses, desire and discipline, Self-sabotage decreases when you consciously integrate what you once rejected, like accepting your loneliness instead of condemning it, and admitting your ambition instead of spiritualizing it away. When the shadow is recognized, it no longer needs to sabotage. You don't believe in integration, which means if you are someone who identifies with a high moral calling, you can pursue this without denying humanity. Jung observed that the psyche compensates for imbalance. If you push too hard for discipline, the unconscious compensates with laziness. The psyche seeks equilibrium. Self-sabotage can be an unconscious balancing. Jung would say that you sabotage yourself because there are parts of you that are unheard. The more you attack yourself, the stronger the shadow becomes. You need integration, becoming whole. You want to be excellent, that is good. But do not neglect your humanity. Integrate the shadow, and it will serve you instead of sabotaging you. Fyodor Dostoevsky's Notes from the Underground. The underground man knows he is intelligent, he knows he is bitter, and knows he pushes people away, and knows he ruins opportunities, but he does it anyway. Why? Because he would rather suffer by his own will than another. The underground man says, even if you prove mathematically what's best for me, I might deliberately act against it just to prove that I am free. Self-sabotage can be seen as proof of freedom. Failure is less humiliating when it is self-inflicted. The underground man, he says, to be overly conscious is a disease. He thinks too much, sees every contradiction. Self-sabotage here is intellectual paralysis. The underground man craves respect and fears humiliation, but when presented with genuine connection, he destroys it because intimacy threatens his defensive identity. Self-sabotage protects pride. You can't truly fail if you never truly tried. Misery can become your home. In the underground man, he says, there is a certain pleasure even in the toothache. Because if you believe you are the miserable one, anything that inflicts suffering will confirm your narrative. In Notes from the Underground, a woman named Liza shows him compassion. He longed for it. But when the offer is intimacy, he rejects it and humiliates her because accepting love would require him to change. And oftentimes, self-sabotage destroys what we secretly desire most. Dostoevsky's characters are always split, either between love and cruelty or faith and doubt. He shows that humans are not rational, yet contradictory. Dostoevsky would say you sabotage yourself because you crave intensity. An ordinary life feels insufficient, so you dramatize your suffering. You sabotage yourself because you are painfully aware. Freud would ask what unconscious force is inside you that is trying to win. Freud divides the psyche into three parts: the ID, which is instinct, impulse, and desire. The second one being ego, which is the rational mediator. The third one being the superego, which is the internalized moral authority. Self-sabotage occurs when these parts are at war. The ID wants immediate pleasure, comfort, sexual gratification. It does not care about your long-term goals. When you escape into fantasy or avoid discomfort, the ID is winning. Freud would say that this is normal because it evolved from survival. The superego is your internal judge. It contains parental voices, religious ideals, moral expectations, and your own perfectionism. It is your superego that is too harsh on yourself. Then the likely cause is, if your superego is super hard on yourself, then you may sabotage yourself. But Freud observed something strange. He believed that people who feel unconscious guilt will unconsciously create failure. Why? To deserve the punishment they feel. Freud noticed people repeat painful patterns, like choosing the same toxic relationships and repeating self-defeating habits. He called this repetition compulsion. The psyche repeats unresolved trauma, hoping to master it, but it just reopens the wound. But Freud proposes Thanatos, the death drive. Humans possess a death drive, and an unconscious tendency toward destruction and self-sabotage by self-undermining, self-hate, and aggression turned inwards. Oftentimes when life moves toward growth, a part of you pulls back because the change you are experiencing destabilizes identity, and the death drive seeks familiarity, even if that familiarity is pure misery. Sometimes self-sabotage often hides behind defenses. These could be like rationalization, saying I don't really want it. Projection, oh, they are the problem. Denial, saying it's not that bad. Displacement, the anger pushed inward. Or intellectualization, which is analyzing feelings instead of feeling them. You think you have control because you think about your problems, not experience it. That is an illusion. Freud believed guilt is often operated below awareness. People tend to sabotage achievement when they feel unworthy of success, because success increases visibility, and this increases vulnerability, so failure feels safer. According to Freud, the unconscious protects the unfamiliar. He would say until those patterns are brought to consciousness, like guilt, repressed desire, fear, shame, and hate, you'll repeat the same patterns of self-sabotage. Make the unconscious conscious. Self-sabotage is not weak or stupid, it is human. You are divided by who you are, what you could become, and what feels safe. The very thing that is protecting you is the same thing that is delaying your growth, because transformation requires change, and change means death to the old self, which is hard, because the old you is what feels safe, but some things have to die in order to be born anew. The path in becoming is slow and painful, but it is the only path you can take to become the self you always wanted to be. The only obstacle is you. You created a prison, thinking you can never escape. But the door was open, but you never left because it felt like home.